I moved into Riverside Estates with my 14-year-old son Marcus 3 years ago, and for the most part, it had been everything we hoped for. The community was quiet, well-maintained, and close enough to my office downtown that my commute was manageable. Marcus had made friends quickly, and I had settled into a comfortable routine working from home most days as a real estate attorney specializing in zoning and development law. It was the kind of place where people waved at each other during evening walks and nobody really bothered anyone else. That all changed the day Karen Mitchell was elected to the HOA board. Karen lived in the largest house at the end of Maple Drive, a pristine colonial with columns that she somehow made look intimidating. She had moved in about 6 months before the board election, and I had only spoken to her a handful of times, usually just polite nods at the mailbox. She seemed pleasant enough on the surface, always perfectly dressed even to take out the trash, always ready with a practiced smile. But there was something in her eyes when she looked around the neighborhood, a calculating quality that suggested she was constantly taking inventory of everything that did not meet her standards. The trouble started on a Saturday morning in late September. Marcus and 3 of his friends were skateboarding in the visitor parking lot near the community center. It was a smooth, flat stretch of asphalt that nobody used on weekends, and the kids had been skating there all summer without incident. They were not grinding on property, not damaging anything, just practicing tricks on the pavement. I was in my home office reviewing contracts when my phone rang. Before we get deeper into this story, if you are enjoying the drama, please hit that like button and subscribe to KarenEatWorld. Your support helps me bring you more stories of entitled people getting exactly what they deserve. Now, back to the chaos. The voice on the other end was clipped and dripping with false politeness. Hello, this is Karen Mitchell from the HOA board. I am calling about your son and his delinquent friends who are vandalizing community property. I blinked at my computer screen, confused. I am sorry, what? Marcus is skateboarding in the parking lot. How is that vandalism? Her tone sharpened immediately. Skateboards damage asphalt and create liability issues. I have already contacted the police about this ongoing disturbance. I suggest you collect your son before he is cited. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my voice level. Karen, kids have been skating in that lot all summer. There is no damage, and it is not being used for anything else. Is there a specific rule against skateboarding? She made a huffing sound. There does not need to be a specific rule. It is reckless behavior, and I, as a board member, have the authority to maintain order in this community. The police are on their way. Then she hung up. I immediately went outside to find Marcus and his friends. They were exactly where I expected them to be, helmets on, taking turns attempting kick flips. No music blaring, no property damage, just kids being kids. I told Marcus to head home and explained that someone had called the police. He looked genuinely confused. But we are not doing anything wrong, Dad. I knew that, but I also knew that sometimes you had to pick your battles. I know, buddy. Let us just cool it for today and I will figure this out. 2 police officers did show up about 15 minutes later. I met them in the parking lot and explained the situation. They were both reasonable, looked around at the undamaged asphalt, and essentially told me that skateboarding in a parking lot was not a crime and there was nothing they could do. One of them even seemed annoyed at having his time wasted. Ma'am called 911 for this, the younger officer muttered, shaking his head. They left without incident, but I knew this was not over. That evening, I received an email from the HOA. It was a formal notice stating that skateboarding, rollerblading, and similar activities were now prohibited in all common areas except designated recreational facilities. The email was signed by Karen Mitchell, board president. I read it 3 times, my irritation building. There were no designated recreational facilities. The community center had a small gym and a pool, but nothing for kids who wanted to skate or bike. This was a rule created specifically to stop Marcus and his friends from doing something completely harmless. I decided to try the reasonable approach first. I requested a meeting with the board, which consisted of Karen and 2 other homeowners who seemed to function mainly as her rubber stamps. The meeting was held in the community center on a Tuesday evening. I came prepared with photos of the parking lot showing zero damage, statistics on youth recreation and community engagement, and a proposal to designate a specific area for skateboarding that would not interfere with anyone. Karen listened to my presentation with her arms crossed and a thin smile on her face. When I finished, she did not even pretend to consider it. "Mr. Torres, I appreciate your passion, but this board has a responsibility to maintain property values and ensure the safety of all residents. Skateboarding is a liability we simply cannot afford. Your son will need to find somewhere else to pursue his hobby." I pointed out that the nearest skate park was 40 minutes away and asked what harm it caused to let kids use an empty parking lot. She leaned forward, her smile widening. "The harm is that I said no. This meeting is adjourned." Over the next month, Karen made it her personal mission to enforce her new rule with ridiculous vigor. She installed cameras pointed at the parking lot. She patrolled the neighborhood in her white SUV during after-school hours. Twice, she called the police when she saw Marcus simply carrying his skateboard through the complex, claiming he was about to break the rules. The officers recognized me by the third call and apologized for the harassment. "Look, Mr. Torres, we know she is wasting everyone's time, but we have to respond to calls," one told me sympathetically. Karen did not stop there. She started issuing fines. $50 for Marcus being seen with a skateboard in common areas. $100 for his friend Tyler, who made the mistake of riding through the parking lot for 10 seconds. She sent formal letters threatening legal action if the behavior continued. She posted signs every 20 feet reading, "No skateboarding, violators will be prosecuted." It was absurd, vindictive, and completely over the top for what amounted to kids trying to have fun in their own neighborhood. I paid the fines to avoid escalation, but I also started doing research. As a real estate attorney with 15 years of experience in property development and zoning law, I knew exactly where to look. I pulled the HOA governing documents, the county zoning regulations, the original development plans for Riverside Estates, and every board meeting minute for the past 5 years. What I found was fascinating. Riverside Estates had been developed on land that was zoned for mixed-use residential and recreational purposes. The original developer had included language in the founding documents requiring the HOA to maintain adequate recreational facilities for residents of all ages. That requirement had been ignored for years, probably because nobody had pushed the issue. But it was still there, legally binding, and according to the exact wording, the HOA was currently in violation of its own governing documents. Even better, I discovered that the visitor parking lot Karen was so obsessed with protecting had been designated in the original site plans as a flexible recreational space. It was always intended to serve dual purposes. The HOA had simply paved it and started using it for overflow parking without ever formally changing its designation. Technically, Marcus had more right to be skating there than cars had to be parked there. I brought this information to the next board meeting, which was open to all residents. I stood up during the public comment period and calmly presented my findings. I explained that the HOA was legally required to provide recreational facilities and that the current board was in violation of the governing documents. I suggested, reasonably, that the simplest solution would be to fulfill that obligation by allowing the parking lot to be used for its intended purpose and designating specific hours for skateboarding. Karen's face went through several shades of red. "That is a creative interpretation, Mr. Torres, but this board has no obligation to cater to your son's demands. If you have a legal complaint, you are welcome to hire a lawyer and waste your money." I smiled politely. "I am a lawyer, Karen. Real estate and development law, actually. And I am not interpreting anything. I am reading directly from the documents that govern this community." The room went quiet. A few other residents looked interested, including several parents of teenagers who had also been targeted by Karen's crusade. Karen recovered quickly, straightening her blazer. "Be that as it may, this board will not be bullied into making reckless decisions." Meeting adjourned. She slammed her gavel down and walked out before anyone else could speak. That night, I made a decision. Karen had made this personal, and she had significantly underestimated who she was dealing with. I was not just some frustrated parent. I had connections throughout the city's real estate and development community. I had worked on projects ranging from small residential developments to multi-million-dollar commercial complexes. And I knew exactly how to use the system to my advantage. I started by filing a formal complaint with the county planning department, documenting the HOA's failure to maintain required recreational facilities. This triggered an official review, which meant the county sent inspectors and started asking questions. The HOA was suddenly facing potential fines and legal complications. At the same time, I reached out to a former client of mine, David Chen, who owned a company specializing in modular recreational facilities. His company had designed and installed skate parks, basketball courts, and playgrounds all over the state. I had helped him navigate zoning issues on a major project 2 years earlier, and he owed me a favor. I explained my situation, and he immediately understood what I was trying to do. "You want to force their hand," he said, grinning over coffee. "I love it. Let me put together a proposal." Within 2 weeks, David had created a comprehensive plan for a world-class skate park that could be installed in the exact location of the visitor parking lot. It included professionally designed ramps, rails, and bowls, all meeting safety standards and ADA accessibility requirements. The best part was the cost. David's company was willing to donate the materials and labor at cost as a community goodwill project, which brought the total price down to something the HOA could actually afford, especially with the county breathing down their necks about compliance. I submitted the proposal to the HOA board through official channels, copied to every homeowner in the community via the resident email list. I framed it as a solution that would bring the community into compliance, provide a valuable amenity, and cost significantly less than the fines the county was threatening. I included architectural renderings, safety certifications, testimonials from other communities with similar installations, and a detailed breakdown of liability insurance that would actually protect the HOA better than their current policy. The response from the community was overwhelmingly positive. Parents loved it. Younger homeowners thought it was a great addition. Even some of the older residents appreciated the idea of having a designated space that would keep skateboarding contained and supervised. People started showing up to board meetings to voice their support. Karen, predictably, lost her mind. She sent an email to all residents calling the proposal reckless, dangerous, and an attempt to turn Riverside Estates into a haven for delinquents. She claimed it would destroy property values and create noise pollution. She insisted that the board would never approve such an irresponsible project. But here is where my planning paid off. I had done something Karen had not anticipated. I had been quietly talking to the other homeowners, building relationships, and explaining the situation. I had also been reviewing the HOA bylaws very carefully. According to those bylaws, any resident could call for a special election to recall board members if they gathered signatures from 30% of homeowners. I had been collecting those signatures for 3 weeks. When I submitted the recall petition with signatures from 42% of the community, Karen's expression was priceless. The look on her face during the mandatory special meeting was even better. She tried to argue that the petition was invalid, that the signatures were fraudulent, that I was manipulating people. None of it worked. The bylaws were clear, and I had followed them perfectly. The special election happened 4 weeks later. Karen and her 2 allies were removed from the board and replaced by 3 new members who were significantly more reasonable. The first item on the new board's agenda was my skate park proposal. It passed unanimously. Construction began 6 weeks after that. David's company was as good as their word, and the installation went smoothly. The skate park was beautiful, professionally designed, and far better than anything I had initially hoped for. It had proper lighting, benches for spectators, and even landscaping around the perimeter. The county inspector signed off on everything, and the compliance issue disappeared. The grand opening was on a Saturday in March. Marcus and his friends were the first ones to use it, and watching them skate on those perfect ramps was worth every hour I had spent making this happen. Dozens of families showed up, and the mood was celebratory. People kept coming up to thank me, telling me how much the community needed something like this. Karen showed up about an hour into the opening. She parked her white SUV across the street and just sat there, staring at the skate park. I noticed her when I was helping set up the snack table. She looked like she was watching her worst nightmare come to life. Kids laughing, parents chatting, everyone enjoying this thing she had fought so hard to prevent. I walked over to her car. She rolled down her window, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. "You think you have one," she said, her voice shaking. "This is not over." I leaned down slightly, keeping my expression pleasant. "Actually, Karen, it is over. The skate park is built. The community loves it. And you are no longer on the board. But I want you to understand something. You called the police on 14-year-old kids for skateboarding. You harassed families. You abused your authority over something completely harmless. All you had to do was be reasonable. Instead, you made it personal. So I made it permanent." I straightened up and walked back toward the skate park, where Marcus was landing a trick he had been practicing for months. Behind me, I heard Karen's car door slam and her engine start. I did not turn around. I did not need to. The skate park would be there tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. Every time she drove past her house, she would see it. Every time she heard the sound of wheels on concrete, she would remember that her own rigidity and vindictiveness had created exactly what she tried to destroy. The moment of victory was not loud or dramatic. It was simply the quiet realization crossing Karen's face as she sat in that car, understanding that she had not just lost a fight. She had created a permanent monument to her own defeat. A beautiful, professionally built, county-approved, community-loved monument that would outlast her tenure, her memory, and her petty need for control. She had tried to use her power to crush something harmless, and instead, she had given the community something wonderful. If you enjoyed watching Karen's power trip backfire spectacularly, please give this video a like and subscribe to KarenEatWorld for more stories of entitled people facing the consequences of their own actions. Drop a comment and let me know what you think of the skate park solution. Thanks for listening.